Hey there, everyone. I'm Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And a couple apologies in advance. There's construction going on outside in a neighbor's yard across the street, so you may end up hearing construction noises. I'm also currently eating a fruit salad, so I may occasionally take a bite out of it, like so. And also, my dog's on the bed, and he's being a little antsy, so you might end up hearing stuff about that. So apologies in advance. But anyway, today we're going to be discussing the third movie to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man 2. And build-up for this film was kind of a big deal. Like, with the release of Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, you knew at this point that they were planning on releasing more movies to build up to the Avengers. Because you can't really just have a team like the Avengers and then just have and then just say, oh, here's all the members, here are the members, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. So you knew there had to be more movies, and honestly, I kind of thought they weren't going to be. I kind of sort of thought they weren't going to do another Iron Man because of this, but lo and behold, they released a second movie. So yeah, when this came up, I was excited because I knew that this would probably be another stepping stone for other Marvel movies, and it looked cool. I thought it looked really cool, so I really wanted to see it. So when it was released, and as a kid, I remembered liking it, though I think even my dad thought it wasn't as good as the first. And now that I'm older and looking at it now, yeah, I'll admit it, the first one was better. But we'll get into those thoughts after I finish with the summary. Picking up right where the first film left off, we start the film off in Moscow. Right, go at the moment. Someone named hold on, I have it written here. Hold on, I'm trying to find it. A man by the name of Anton Venko is on his deathbed and watching this. Tending to Anton is his son, a man by the name of Ivan Venko. What they're watching is the press conference from the first movie where Tony pretty much outed himself, with a translator on describing everything and so forth. And so as they're watching this, Anton ends up kind of keeling over with Ivan going over him. Anton's last words to Ivan are how he wished how he could have left him with more than just his knowledge. And so, kind of reeling with grief, and Ivan goes through his dad's stuff and finds a blueprint for an arc reactor that has Howard Stark's name and Anton's name on it. And immediately he starts getting to work making his own miniature arc reactor. In the meantime, as he's building this, Tony is apparently using the Iron Man technology to pretty much just do superhero stuff, settling conflicts between the East and West, helping people, just being a hero. And so, fast forward 6 months we see Tony at the opening of something called the Stark Expo, a year-long event where inventors of all kinds come together and show off their technology to help as Tony puts it, help pretty much secure the future, make everything better, to help the future and the future generations and so forth. So Tony, after doing his introduction, shows a video of his dad marking the Stark Expo from '74. But when he's away, he tests his blood he ends up testing a sample of his blood for toxicity, and it says that it's now 10% toxic, which Tony isn't happy about. However, he soon meets up with Happy Hogan, and they start being let out. And Stan Lee's Larry King. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm obligated to mention every Stan Lee cameo up until they stop showing up. But as they're as they're being let out, though, they go to Tony's new car where there's a woman out there, and it turns out this woman works for the government, and the reason she's there is because she's issuing Tony a subpoena to appear in court and to appear in front of the U.S. Senate. As such, Tony decides that he's just gonna go there, and so he goes straight there, and pretty much what they want from Tony is the Iron Man suit. Like, they think that because Tony apparently has not shared that technology with anybody. He's used it exclusively for himself, and while he has been of great help, unfortunately, he's unfortunately, since he's not affiliated with the government, he's seen as a threat. Something that, hold on, I'm gonna look at this. So sorry about that. I'm gonna continually use this every now and then, but anyway. So pretty much what they want from him is that So pretty much what's going on is that they want, like I said, they want the Iron Man technology, and Tony is not willing to share it. And honestly, I think that's kind of fair enough a little bit. Like, Tony is kind of arrogant with how he does it. Like, he says that it's my technology, I made it, Iron Man is me, if you want me to hand the suit over, you're essentially putting me into indentured slavery. But, admittedly, with what went on in the first movie, you can kind of understand why he wouldn't be so willing to share the technology with to make Iron Man, since the last person that got access to that technology wanted to try and sell it. So I can kind of understand why Tony is not very willing to share it. However, there are two witnesses. The U.S. Senate does have two witnesses to back them up. One is Rhodey, who apparently compiled a report on Iron Man detailing how he could be a possible threat, but he felt that the benefits of having Iron Man on their side outweighed the problems, especially. But of course, the Senate's only interested in the part where he said that Tony's a possible threat, as well as their weapons dealer Justin Hammer, who is the secondary villain in this movie. He's also a weenie. Yeah, I'm just gonna throw that out there right now. Justin Hammer's a weenie in this movie. Like, I think even if you weren't aware, I think if you knew what he was like in the comics, which I only know like some of the stuff about how he was in the comics, but I knew he was an older guy in the comics and apparently more of a force to be reckoned with. But here he's a weenie, just a total weenie scumbag, whatever. And he's just kind of a tool. But yeah, apparently he tries to make a case about how Tony is not sharing the technology, how they probably should, and so Rhodey also shows there some satellite footage of other countries that are trying to build their own replica Iron Man suits to try and make the case for maybe why Tony should hand over the tech for the suit. To which Tony responds by showing camera footage from all those tests, and they all pretty much are failures. All the other times that any other means of creating their own version of Iron Man is just bad, and especially what's even funnier is that he shows one that Hammer's attempt at making his own Iron Man, and the guy in the suit, short version, guy in the suit trying to make a turn. The entire top half of the suit did a complete 180, and yeah, it did not look pretty. Excuse me a sec. Sorry about that. I thought someone needed me. Anyway, yeah, Tony pretty much proves that any attempts at making a functioning Iron Man replica, ripoff, or whatever seem to be way behind the times and so he thinks everyone's secure, and so he just walks out looking like the hero. However, things are still not going well at home as Tony. Well, actually, scratch that. Let's go back. Sorry. As Tony goes into his garage, into his own little personal area, into his little lab, and we soon learn why he was checking why his blood is toxic. It turns out that the palladium in the arc reactor he uses in his chest is slowly poisoning him. The more he uses it, the more it makes his blood toxic, and if he continues to use it, it will eventually kill him. Unfortunately, though, the palladium is also the only element that could withstand that could give the power needed to create the arc reactor. Hold on a sec. Sorry about that again. So, pretty much, it's either quick death by taking out the arc reactor and just letting the shrapnel in his heart kill him, or slow death via palladium, and neither option seems like a good one. However, despite all this, he's not telling Pepper about what's going on with him, and as Pepper goes to chew him out for giving away his priceless art collection to the Boy Scouts, tries to tell her that he wants her to become that he wants to name her CEO of Stark Industries. That because they're dealing with a lot of problems right now and coming from all directions. So he says that he wants to name Pepper the new CEO, which yeah, she's kind of awestruck by, but she decides yeah, she'll do that. But she agrees, yeah, she'll be CEO. Excuse me. In the meantime, though, Stark wants to get a job position for a new assistant. And I'm mentioning this now because it's important. And so Pepper comes in, and so Pepper meets up with Tony as he and Happy Hogan are duking it out. And yeah, they call him Happy for this movie, so I'm okay with that. But as Tony and Happy are just kind of just boxing, Pepper comes in with all the paperwork needed to sign over Stark Industries to her. But it's ultimate. However, and with her is a notary. A woman by the name of Natalia. Hold on, her name is. Hold on, sorry, phones. I should keep this thing unlocked, but it wastes battery. So what can I do? Natalie Rushman. Sorry, I don't remember that because I don't remember the name. But pretty much Tony decides to she's there. She's pretty much just there she's pretty much there just for legal stuff. Last time, I promise. So anyway, as I was saying, Natalie's there to sorry. Natalie is there to pretty much just sign over Stark Industries to Pepper. But at the same time, Tony mentions that Tony is looking for an assistant and that they have some candidates lined up. But Tony takes a liking to Natalie, not only because she's pretty, but as they're talking about possible assistants, Tony looks up her history, her references, etc., and it turns out that she apparently is a very talented young woman. Especially when Happy invites her in for some boxing, she pretty much just throws him down with little to no effort. As such, once Tony finishes up the paperwork to sign to name Pepper Potts the new CEO of Stark Industries, Tony tells Pepper that he wants Natalie to be his new assistant, and while Pepper says no, not gonna happen, Tony pretty much goes behind her back and makes Natalie his new assistant anyway. So, in the meantime, though, we see Ivan back in Moscow, and we see that he's managed to harness his own arc reactor into his own new set of some weapons. In this case, he's using it to create a whip. As such, pretty much channeling all the repulsor energy that Iron Man would use in his gloves into two electrified whips. As such, once he completes that, he goes to some friends that he has in the underground, and he manages to get a fake passport and a ticket to Morocco. And it turns out that the reason he wants to go to Morocco is because Tony Stark is going to Morocco. It turns out there's a Grand Prix going on there, and Tony has a car in the Grand Prix. So of course he's going to be the represent. Of course, Justin Hammer is there, and they start going on. Sorry. And so, of course, Justin's there, and he tries to kind of get a moment in with Tony, etc. But Tony's just kind of blowing him off, while Pepper is still trying to get used to being CEO, and on top of that, with the dumb decision that Tony made along with the dumb decision Tony made to hire Nat. Well, pretty much just reeling from Tony doing his thing. However, Tony excuses himself to go to the bathroom, and in the bathroom he checks his blood toxicity levels, and it's gone up. And so as he just kind of reels for more from this, he decides that he wants to do something stupid, and so he replaces his driver in the Grand Prix, because his logic, why own a car if you're not going to drive it? As such, he's now in the Grand Prix, which of course Pepper is not exactly happy with. But while he's driving, he's suddenly getting a. We see that in the road crew for the racetrack, we see Ivan, who it turns out was waiting for this, and I don't know how he did this. I think maybe he was planning on finding Tony Stark, or at least causing commotion to get his attention. Maybe he heard about Tony's last-minute substitution of his driver, and he went to try and get into the road crew. But either way, once But either way, as the Grand Prix is underway, he goes out onto the track and he activates his whips, and we see, and the power from them ends up burning off his jumpsuit, and we see that underneath he's got this metal exoskeleton with the arc reactor in the center, fueling powered to the whips, and we see him pretty much just going at, and so we see him as he uses one of the whips to pretty much slash a car in the Pre in half, causing it to crash, and so yeah, he is now the supervillain Whiplash. And I only knew about him, and don't ask me how I knew about him prior to this movie. I think he may have appeared in the animated series, but don't quote me on that. I knew he was a villain. I knew his name. I knew he was a villain, but don't ask me how I know him. I don't even know. When I saw him, I knew it was Whiplash. So I don't know, but not about that. Pretty much, his target is Tony. As when Tony drives up, he slashes his car and immediately starts targeting it. As such, through all the commotion, Pepper goes to Happy and tells him and asks him if he has a suitcase, and we see him having a red suitcase, and so Pepper and Happy get into a car and drive out onto the track and while Tony does manage to escape his car, unfortunately, Ivan's is too good for him, and so eventually it looks like it's too good for him, but thankfully Tony is saved when Happy rams his car into Ivan. Tony does rightfully call Happy out because he thinks, "What were you trying to run me over?" But it turns out that Ivan's not unconscious or dead, as he immediately gets up and starts slashing at the car, even slashing the door Tony was going to use to enter. As such, in the commotion, he does slash off another part of the car, but this allows Pepper to throw Tony his briefcase, and it turns out that it's another Iron Man suit, which he immediately puts on and uses to easily subdue Ivan. And I do mean easily. It's a short fight, allowing him to withstand his whips long enough so they can get close, knock him down, and then rip the arc reactor out of his suit and crush it. As such, Ivan is immediately arrested, and Tony goes to see him, and it turns out that Ivan has a bit of history with the Stark family, or at least his father did. As I'm just going to get this out there right now because it's given to us via exposition later. Anton Venko, Ivan's father, was a Russian Soviet who defected to the U.S., and helped Howard Stark build the arc reactor, or at least design it. However, he was planning on selling the arc reactor for pretty much make him some money, and the instant Howard heard about this, he got him excommunicated and shipped off. Upon arriving back in Russia, he was sent off. Anton was sent off to Siberia, where he wound up having Ivan, and pretty much just the environment did not shape Ivan into a good person, as Ivan himself is a physicist, but has actually been arrested for selling plutonium. So, yeah, neither of them are. Neither of them is, you know what I mean? They're not good guys. So, as such, Ivan calls Tony a thief and says that the sins of his family, that no matter what Tony does, he can't rewrite the sins of his family. And so Tony wants to know how the heck he had the arc reactor. He doesn't tell him a thing, so Tony decides to just leave, thinking that Ivan's no longer a threat. But Ivan also knows that the palladium. Sorry, I'm going to look it up again. I think it's palladium. I did say palladium before. That's what happens when you try to unlock your phone, but you're not looking at it. Yeah, palladium. He also knows the palladium is slowly killing Tony, so he makes a hint saying it's a painful way to go. As such, Tony just kind of leaves him, but however, while Ivan was out going full ape shit on the racetrack, it turns out that there was a news crew covering it, and like I said, Justin Hammer was there as well, and so he sees Ivan just going nuts with the arc reactor, and he wants it and he suddenly thinks he has a golden opportunity. As such, once Ivan is locked away in prison, a guard gives him some lunch, but there's a note attached to it that says, "Please enjoy the potatoes," and then when Ivan inspects the potatoes, it turns out it's actually C4. And immediately upon getting that, the same guard comes in with another prisoner that looks a little bit like Ivan, and we see that he has a jumpsuit with the same prisoner number on it. And so Ivan realizes what's going on as he immediately subdues the guy and knocks him out. And then the same guard drops a key at his door while Ivan plants a C4 and sets the timer. As such, Ivan gets out of his cell, and after taking out 2 guards, the cell explodes, and amidst the chaos, 2 guards get Ivan, put a bag on him, and get him out of the prison. As when Ivan wakes up, he finds himself in pretty much a nice hangar, and we see that Justin Hammer's there with a nice little dinner table set up and everything. Pretty much, he says that he's impressed by what Ivan did, and so he wants to bring Ivan on as to help him help him manufacture the arc reactor and the technology that Tony used in the Iron Man suit. And Ivan is actually more than happy to help. In the meantime, though, with what Ivan did, or with what Whiplash did, whatever. I'm gonna keep calling him Ivan until Whiplash sounds better. Sorry. But with Ivan's debut, let's call it, pretty much now all the heat is back on Tony, as I'm guessing what Ivan wanted to do. When Tony went to see Ivan, he said that if you make God believe, he would stop believing in him. And my guess is that him going out there as Whiplash and just destroying everything was meant to do 2 things: kill Tony Stark and reveal that the arc reactor technology could be accessible. And unfortunately, and while he failed in one regard, he did succeed in the other. He showed the world that someone was able to build a second arc reactor and use it. And so with the fact that the Iron Man technology can now be replicated means that Tony's statements about how these other governments are like 10 or 15 or 20 years behind, are now just a load now. So pretty much all heat is now back on Tony, but Tony seems to be just kind of brushing it off. As such, Tony and even tells Pepper that he doesn't want to go home, that maybe they could just go somewhere, and Pepper thinks it's a bad idea, but Tony thinks now is a good time as any. But they eventually do go. But yeah, Tony does eventually go, but Pepper does eventually. But they decide that they are going to go home, or at least Pepper decides for Tony, because Tony does not tell Pepper at any point in this movie that he's got palladium poisoning until near the end. So throughout most of this movie, she has no idea why he's being so self-destructive. As such, hold on, I'm going to check my phone for more plot details. Sorry. Going back to this thing. Oh yeah. Anyway, so pretty much we cut to later on where it's the evening of Tony's birthday. That's part of the reason why he's back. And Tony, being rich, is holding a fancy party, but he's still not doing well with the palladium poisoning and everything. Rhodey ends up stopping by the party around this time and wants to try and talk with Tony, because he's been trying to back Tony up, try to defend him and everything. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention this. Tony's not played by Don Cheadle. Terrence is now he's gone. Don't know why, but from this movie onward, Don Cheadle is James Rhodey. But yeah, that's a detail. So anyway, Rhodey goes to Tony and is trying to get him through this thing, saying that he can do this, and he is trying to defend him, saying that Rhodey keeps trying to defend Tony, telling him that he can do this, telling him that Tony's better off with this technology, that he doesn't need it, yada yada yada. But Tony's continue brushing off of everything is just not helping. And so when Rhodey tries telling Tony that he tries to give Tony another route, tries to rouse Tony some more, it still doesn't work, and Rhodey just kind of leaves Tony alone for a little while. In the meantime, though, Tony goes up and Natalie comes in, and so Tony speaks to her and says, well, and just kind of has a talk with her, saying, if this was your last birthday, what would you do? And Natalie says, well, I think I'd just do whatever the heck I wanted. And so Tony takes that advice to heart, and the next time we see him, he's in the Iron Man suit at the party, plastered off his ass, as he's just making a complete fool of himself in front of everybody. Just kind of going nuts, having fun, just kind of going nuts, doing stupid shit, everything. And yeah, the fact that he's in the Iron Man suit is not helping his case. especially since this is supposed to be this very secure piece of technology that's supposed to be used for defense and only defense, and all these governments want it, and Tony is saying, no, I'm not going to give it to you, and now here he is just partying in it like it was a cheap suit. And so, of course, Rhodey comes in at this time and sees him, and he's just pissed off because he keeps defending Tony as everybody is firing on him. So the fact that he's now just doing all this is just fine. It's kind of like the last straw. And Pepper tries to get Tony to end the party and calm down, but Tony is not in the mood to listen. And when she ends the party, he says the after party's starting right up, and so they can just continue partying, especially when he accidentally activates the repulsor rays and now just starts blowing stuff up for amusement. At which point, Rhodey finally has just had enough. And so he goes downstairs. And a little detail I liked, is because Tony has this whole array of Iron Man suits in the back, and we see some of their older models are back there too, including the Mark I, which I kind of like. Makes sense that he'd keep it, considering that the last time he left it alone, someone else took it and repurposed it into another suit. And so Rhodey goes in there and gets the Mark II suit, the silver one that Tony was working on. And he puts it on. So while Tony's going nuts upstairs, Rhodey comes up in the suit and tells everyone in the party to just get the F out. And so seeing this other guy being completely serious and also wearing an Iron Man suit, you don't want to screw with that. As such, it's just Tony, Rhodey, and the DJ left. And so Tony tells the DJ to put on some music. And so Rhodey and Tony get into a fight. Rhodey is just kind of angry at Tony and tells him he doesn't deserve the suit, that he needs to just turn this thing off. But Tony is still too drunk to listen and tells Rhodey that he just needs to put the suit back. But Rhodey and Tony are just going full at it as we get a nice personal fight, as seeing them just kind of going nuts, doing whatever they can, kicking each other, blasting each other, punching, grabbing weapons, even using weights like sticks and clubs and whatever, because, well, they're both in Iron Man suits, so they can take it. But as the fight progresses, their fight gets into the bar, and while Tony knocks Rhodey down, the party guests are seeing this, and Tony just kind of yells at them, and they all run off. But Rhodey ends up throwing him down, and immediately Tony gets a pulsar ray ready, and Rhodey does the exact same thing. He tells Rhodey to put his hand down, but Tony keeps batting him. It's like, oh, you want to be a war machine? You want to do this? You gotta get through. It's like, well, then do it. And Rhodey keeps trying to talk him down, but Tony's still going for it. And it eventually ends up both of them trying to blast each other with their repulsor rays, and it causes a massive explosion that sends Tony reeling into a wall. As such, Tony's just kind of out of it, but he does manage to wake up enough to see Rhodey give him one last look before flying away in his suit. As such, Rhodey at this point is just kind of done with Tony and thinking that the suit is just kind of done with Tony, and decides that if Tony isn't going to use this respectively, he shouldn't have it. So he immediately flies the suit to a government base where they begin dissecting it. When in the meantime, with Whiplash and Hammer, we see that Hammer has his own Iron Man, has his own set of suits. The ones that pretty much turn a guy 180 degrees. And he wants Ivan to perfect the suit. He wants Ivan to perfect the technology to make it. And Ivan, of course, to show how smart he is, just easily hacks into Hammer's mainframe because, as he puts it, the defense is shit. But he immediately gets to work looking through the diagnostics, and he immediately starts making his own changes. As every time we cut back to him, we see Hammer trying to accommodate for him and trying to get and work with him, even getting him a bird because he had a bird back in Moscow. But we see Ivan starting to convert the suits into drones instead of things that people can wear. Hammer, of course, is not happy about this because this is not what he paid for. But Ivan tells him this is better because humans make mistakes, so maybe they should probably be drones, and that Hammer should trust him that this is what he'll need to one up Tony Stark and so forth. And so Hammer, of course, Hammer is still getting annoyed at this, but he does manage to get a golden goose with Rhodey in the suit. As when Rhodey dropped it off, immediately the government called in Justin Hammer to pretty much pimp it out, let's say, as as Hammer comes in, and now he's pretty much just got what he needs: a suit with an Iron Man suit with its own arc reactor and everything which they can utilize and weaponize. As such, they begin adding all these weapons to it, like a minigun, just all these various guns and projectiles and everything, including a super missile called the Ex-Wife. Just making it a war, like what Tony said, a war machine. So pretty much, it's just making it bigger and better. As in the meantime, we cut back to Tony, who after he got one upped at his party, went to a donut shack and is just eating a donut. And who should meet him there but Nick Fury, who went to go talk to him. And so, as he and Tony go inside the donut place to actually talk, and apparently Tony said no to the Avengers Initiative originally, because apparently it doesn't work well with others. I'll get back to that later. But we also get a nice little bombshell as we see Natalie come in full. As we see Natalie come in. Her last name actually isn't Rushman, it's Romanov. And I think her first name is Natasha. I don't know. I think it's either Natalie or Natasha. Later films will tell me otherwise. But we see, it turns out that she was actually in bed, that she was intentionally brought in to embed herself in Stark Industries and keep an eye on Tony. So she's actually a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Tony, of course, is not happy to hear this. But Nick Fury sees, but as he's kind of in a mood, Nick Fury sees the corrodium poisoning on his neck, because part of the poisoning is that you see his veins turning a lot darker and blue. As such, to help combat it, they inject him with something that's supposed to hamper the symptoms of corrodium poisoning. So it will help Tony, but it doesn't cure him either. And Nick pretty much tells Tony that if he wants to fix himself, that he needs to be able to fix himself. They need to get him back up and running. As such, they bring Tony back to his house, and Fury tells Tony about what his dad about the arc reactor and Howard's connection to Anton Venko. Well, Nick Fury does go into what Anton was going to do, but he also talks about how Howard was planning to use the arc reactor for something else. Like, for him, while it was revolutionary, he said it was a stepping stone for something bigger, something that he said would revolutionize energy. So, unfortunately, he wasn't able to complete it because of his death in the car accident. But however, Fury does have all of the stuff that Tony would need to complete the project, because apparently Howard thought that Tony would be the best person to actually be able to finish it. And while Tony doesn't exactly think that his dad would think so highly of him, because apparently he and his dad did not have a good relationship, Nick Fury thinks otherwise, especially since he actually did know Howard Stark, or I think he knew him. We know that either way, we learned that Howard Stark was apparently one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., which Tony did not know. As such, Nick Fury pretty much places Tony under house arrest, as he tells him that he's going to stay in here and work on this thing as best as he can, while all outside channels would be cut, all connections outside would be cut off, so that Tony won't be disturbed, and watching over him will be Coulson. And if Tony does anything other than work, pretty much Coulson will tase him. As such, with that motivator in mind, Tony starts looking through his father's notes, and eventually manages to find he does find some stuff, but unfortunately he gets cut off at one point, so he doesn't really know what else to do. But he also finds some old reel from that his dad was trying to film. It's pretty much meant the intro for the Stark Expo, and starts playing it. And while it is just full of outtakes and retakes of him trying to do it well, there is one more scene where Howard says that he left all this for Tony, and how he knew he wouldn't understand as a kid, hence why he filmed it, and how he believes that Tony would be the best person to actually handle this, how he cared about him, and all that nice sentimental gooey stuff. As such, Tony decides that he needs a talk. That with that in mind, he probably should tell Pepper about what's going on with him. As such, he breaks the perimeter and leaves his mansion and goes to talk to Pepper, who's dealing with all the fallout from everything. Him hit with Tony's freaking out and the whiplash and everything. As such, he goes to her and even gets her strawberries, though she had said that that's the one thing in the world she's allergic to, so yeah, I can't eat them. And Tony keeps trying to tell her I'm sorry, or he tries to work up to it and explain what's going on with him, but Pepper, like Rhodey, has had enough with his shit too, so she just doesn't want. So she pretty much tells him that no matter that she doesn't want to hear from him, she's dealing with all this other stuff, and she thinks it's best if he just leave. Especially poor salt in the wound when Natalie comes in, who's back in her cover as assistant now, except now working for Pepper because, well, Tony at this point is not good company. And even Happy apparently abandoned him, so Tony feels alone. As such, they all leave Tony there. Pepper telling Tony with Natalie telling Tony he can either leave or she'll call someone to come and collect him. But just as Tony's leaving, he sees this model of the Stark Expo grounds that his father used in the filming from Stark Expo 74. And when he looks at it, he starts kind of realizing something about it. Like he thinks it looks a bit strange. As such, he grabs it and hauls it into his car and drives back to his mansion. After he manages to get inside, he has Jarvis scan it, and it turns out that the model is actually a blueprint for an atom. And so Tony realizes that with all the notes his father was doing and what he was experimenting on, it turns out his father had discovered a new element that the arc reactor was meant to help pave the way for. While he's able to neutralize the blueprints of the Stark Expo into something that could be feasible, unfortunately they don't have enough energy to synthesize this new element. As such, Tony starts going through reconstruction and just starts starts breaking down the walls, getting wiring in, pretty much just getting all this heavy machinery out to try and getting all this heavy machinery out and old stuff to try and get all this organized and make this new element. Coulson even comes down and says that you broke perimeter, but he sees what Tony's doing. And Tony even a nice little thing. We see the Captain America shield, except it looks disassembled and half finished. And so Tony used it to prop up a coil. But Coulson is only there to tell him that he's been reassigned. Apparently there's something going on in New Mexico that Nick Fury wants him to look into, so he says goodbye to Tony and tells him don't give up, that they need him. As such, Tony is able to successfully utilize all this technology and all the blueprints that his father gave him, and manages to essentially create a new chess piece. This one based on a new element. What is it called? I don't know. I don't care. They never say it in the film. I don't think they ever say it at all in the MCU, so I don't know. But anyway, with that, Tony has pretty much synthesized a new power source for the arc reactor. As such, he puts it in, and the arc reactor thankfully accepts it. And so, with all that in mind, they need to do diagnostics. But in the meantime, Justin Hammer is preparing for his event at the Stark Expo because he's got a little area lined up for his own presentations. And what he wanted to do is show off the drones that Whiplash was making for him. But as he tries questioning Whiplash about them, saying that why come on, I need to demonstrate them. He's like, and Whiplash says no, they're only for presentation right now. And of course, Hammer is just pissed off because he keeps at because what are you talking about? Why can't we demonstrate them? And he says, just trust me on this. And as he's saying that, as he's telling him this because they're talking over the phone, we see that Ivan is making new whips powered by the arc reactor. Powered by his own arc reactor. And yeah, Hammer is pretty much a patsy. Hammer is a patsy. At this point... Ah! Sorry about that. My dog decided to lean on my stand. He's right there. That's got to be stuck in there. Anyway, as I was saying, making new whips, using arc reactors, and Hammer's a patsy. So Hammer at this point has just kind of had it up. Sorry about that. I moved the dog. He shouldn't be leaning on anything anymore. But anyway, like I said, Hammer is pretty much fed up with Vanko at this point. As such, she pretty much just locks him in a room with two guards and tells him that once he gets back from the presentation, they're gonna renegotiate their terms. Otherwise, he's just gonna throw him out. He's just gonna throw him out. And Hammer thinks he's especially got more clout with this because he's got the War Machine suit now. Unfortunately, Venko's too good. Venko's better than him, as the guards that Venko leaves, that Justin Hammer leaves the guard Venko, he kills. Like, he just easily kills them. And as Tony is still testing out the new power source for the arc reactor, Venko calls him and pretty much just rubs it in that he's going to pretty much tear down everything Tony's ever built in 40 minutes. As such, Tony decides that he can't do any more preliminaries as he gets the new power source, as he gets the arc reactor ready, and puts it in his chest, which immediately powers him. We then, as such, then cut to the Stark Expo where we see Hammer getting ready for his expo as he shows off all the drones and everything while Pepper and Natalie are in the audience watching. Even they realize that this guy is just full of shit. But in the middle of his expo, he also says that while these drones are very capable, they still need a human touch, and so he presents Rhodey in the War Machine suit. Like, he's just going on. It's really nice and it does definitely look like something built for military with all the guns strapped in and everything. However, as he's presenting this, people suddenly hear something flying in, and in flies in Tony and in flies in Iron Man. Like, in a new suit, and we got the triangle power source and everything with the new reactor and so forth. And so Rhodey thinks that Tony's there to fight and take his suit back, but instead Tony goes up to him and tells him that they need to work together for a little while because he says Venko's alive and Hammer's probably working with him. Rhodey immediately hears this and he's actually a little in disbelief, though he does hear Tony out. And so Tony goes up to Hammer and asks him where the heck Venko is. But at that point, Venko plays his hand as he manages to hack into the Hammer mainframe again, and he takes control of the drones and the War Machine suit, pretty much turning them on Tony and the rest of the expo. As such, they get into a big chase as Tony leads the drones and War Machine throughout all of the expo. Rhodey is able to still communicate with him via his suit, but unfortunately he's not in any control of what he's doing. And so Tony as such, Pepper and Natalie go into the back, and Hammer is trying to get control of his drones again, but unfortunately everything's locked out. They're pretty much screwed. And so Pepper starts chewing Hammer out, wanting to know where Ivan is, like who's behind this and everything. And actually, she's asking who's behind this. And while Hammer says he doesn't know, Natalie is not having any of his crap, and she just grabs him throws him onto a table, and just pulls his arm behind his back until he finally tells her, "Yep, it's Ivan Venko, and he's back in the lab, and he's the one hacking all this." As such, Pepper stays behind with Hammer so they can try and find a way to get control of the drones. Plus, Pepper calls the police on Hammer, which, later on he gets arrested, thinking that it's a power move on Pepper's part, even though he released a criminal, even knowing that this guy was dangerous and threatened people. And so, Natalie has Happy bring her to Hammer Tech, where she immediately changes out of her work clothes into her, I guess we can easily say, superhero attire, because she's Black Widow. And I'm not going to get into my personal history with Black Widow in this video. I'm going to say that for her solo movie. Any film, I'm going to say that for the title kit. I'm just going to throw this out there right now. If another superhero appears in a film, I'm still going to just talk exclusively about the superhero. I'll talk about them in their solo movies. Maybe I'll give them a look at if they don't have any other movies. But otherwise, I know Black Widow's going to have a solo film, so I'll say my personal history with her for there. But short version, she is a super spy. I think she worked for the Russians. She was originally an Iron Man villain, but then she defected and became a good guy working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and working with the Avengers. So that's her in the comics. But anyway, as such, once they get to Hammer Tech, what I find amusing is that Happy goes in to help her and his insistence. And so, as they encounter a guard, which Happy starts fighting with, and while it takes him all this, while Happy does manage to subdue the guard, while he was struggling with him, Natalie pretty much fought and took out all the other guards. And it's actually really nice. It's a really nice fight scene, seeing her just pretty much just steamroll all of them, and it's using all this technology to fight them off, knock them out. One guy gets hung off a rafter, and the last guy she just tases, so that's kind of funny. And so they managed to make it into the control room, but unfortunately at that point Ivan has pretty much cut and run. But at this point they're able. But at this point Tony has managed to take out about half of the drones, half of the Hammer drones, except for War Machine, who is still chasing him relentlessly. As a, oh yeah, one little fun thing. During the chase, one of the drones almost attacked a kid wearing an Iron Man suit, but Tony managed to save him. By blasting the robot behind him, by blasting at the robot while he's behind the kid. Fun. I'm only mentioning this because apparently that kid was Peter Parker. Just saying that. And I'm just gonna say that now. That's all. Anyway, so after he managed to take out half the drones, War Machine tackled him into this little greenhouse or this little nature area at the Stark Expo. But thankfully, now that Natalie's in the control room, she's able to hack into the terminal and pretty much reboots the War Machine armor so that Rhodey's in control again. As such, Natalie tells them that more drones are headed their way, and after Tony and Rhodey have an argument about where they should be, at that point the drones appear, and so Tony and Rhodey just go to town with them, just blasting them, shooting them, and just going all out, just going nuts with them, and it's really fun, and it's always nice when the heroes go up against robots because it lets them be as violent as they want, and without pushing without going over the edge. And so it's just nice, and Tony eventually ends it by using a laser to fry the rest of them. Though Rhodey asked why he didn't use it before, and the reason Tony didn't is because it's one use. One use, can't use it again unless you have preparation. So yeah. But Natalie says that a new drone is coming in, and this one seems a bit more powerful than the others. And so we see that it turns out it's not a drone, as we see that Ivan has now built another suit. I personally preferred the original model. I kind of liked that, using the same technology but using it in a different way. I liked it. So seeing him in essentially another Iron Man suit with his whips and everything, no, I don't really care that much for. It's just kind of dumb. But Tony and Rhodey managed to fight him off. Do try fighting him, but though he's still too powerful, and funny little thing, it's a perfect anticlimax as Rhodey tries to use the ex-wife on him, and the instant it shoots at him, it just bounces off his armor and sputters out. That's cute. But pretty much, they get into a fight with Ivan, and eventually they manage to get caught in his whips, but Tony realizes what they need to do to stop him, and so Tony and Rhodey do what they did back at Tony's mansion, as they shoot their repulsor rays at each other, and it causes an explosion that destroys a large amount of Vanko's armor. As such, Tony and Rhodey go to check on him, and he's not dead, but it turns out he had a plan B. As it turns out, if he was ever defeated, his suit, as well as all the other drones throughout the Stark Expo, would self-destruct. As such, Tony and Rhodey immediately bail, but Tony goes to free Natalie, not Natalie, sorry. She goes to Pepper because she stayed at the expo to keep everything in line. And so as he sees the drone beeping down, he comes in and saves her just before it explodes, and they go to a roof. Pepper, I'm sorry, getting their names mixed up, sorry. Pepper starts freaking out about all this because she doesn't want to keep dealing with this, and apparently she overheard, and yeah, I forgot to mention this, Natalie was in communication with Tony, and a little bit, and Pepper managed to come into the conversation and learn that, and Natalie mentioned that apparently he managed to find a way to fix himself, and when Pepper realized that he was dying of palladium poisoning, she was like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" It's like, I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't let me, and yada yada yada. But eventually, in all this, Tony keeps telling her, "I'm sorry, you deserve someone better. You've done so much for me and everything," and she just keeps freaking out. But then Tony goes in for a kiss, and it's actually a little cute. They're just kind of happy, and so once they're done kissing, they start kissing again. It's nice seeing that little build up, seeing this kind of build up between the films. But as they're kissing, it turns out Rhodey is there because the roof they're on is the roof he retreated onto. And so Rhodey leaves, taking the War Machine suit because apparently his car got blown up in all the fighting. And a nice little thing, Tony never asks when it's nice because he doesn't. And Tony never asks for it back. He lets Rhodey keep the suit because Rhodey wears it in later movies. But with Whiplash taken care of, the next time we see Tony, he's sitting down with Nick Fury, asking about the Avengers Initiative as he's reconsidered working for it. And while Tony is not allowed to see the stuff with the Avengers Initiative, Nick Fury does let him see the file that that personnel file that Natalie compiled in while she was working for him. And she called him self-destructive, narcissistic, and just kind of a danger. But at the end of the file, she said that Iron Man was probably a good idea for the Avengers. Tony Stark, not so much. As such, Tony is now labeled as an advisor for the Avengers, so he's technically in, but technically not. But before everything's over with, Tony asks Nick for one last favor because he and Rhodey are getting medals of honor for saving everyone. And Nick Fury decides to pull some strings at the senator that was giving Tony crap when he went in for questioning is the one that has to pin the medals on them. And yeah, it's kind of amusing. But of course, since this is a Marvel movie, after that little scene, we get our after credits scene as we cut back to Coulson as he's going out to New Mexico for whatever he was needed for, and we see that what he was called for was this weird crater, and so he calls up Fury and says that they found it, and the last thing we see in the movie is the camera panning over to what's at the center of the crater, as we see a hammer embed in the ground. So yeah. So short version, I think the first film is better. Like, no comparison. The first Iron Man, I think, was better than this one. With that being said, I don't think this film is bad, but I will admit it's got some problems. Like, let's look at some stuff here. Like, I think the first major problem I can think of is the villains. Hammer and Whiplash. Justin Hammer and Whiplash. And, yeah. Now, I'm not gonna go nuts going up against their actors, because I think Hammer, for playing this Weasley weirdo that he is, I think the actor that got to play him was fine. And Mickey Rourke, I think, does a good job with what he's given as Whiplash. I think that's good. I think it's good. That's consistent between the movies. But unfortunately, Whiplash is not that great as a villain. Like, as a Force, he's cool. Like, when he made his first big supervillain reveal, that was kick-ass. Like, he just walks onto a racetrack, pulls out his electrified whips, and then just starts slashing everything. That is a cool bad guy reveal. He is intelligent enough. Like, how cool and laid back he is as he's casually playing Hammer, as he's building a new arc reactor for his suit. That's cool. I like that. But as a villain, he's lacking. His motivation is just, your dad ripped off my dad, so now I'm gonna get revenge on you. And that's just kind of it. It's just kind of, and unlike other villains, like with the Ironmonger or the Abomination, we don't get that much on him. Sorry, my dog's over there. I don't want to pause this again. He's gonna have to stay there. So, unfortunately, like, we know he's sly, we know that he's cunning, but unfortunately, that's all we get. He's just kind of a bit of a smart aleck, and he hates Tony. And as for Justin Hammer, I already went into him. He's a weenie. Like, oh my god, this guy is a weenie. Like, the first time we see him, he's just so pompous and full of himself, but he keeps getting one-upped by Tony or treated like garbage. Hell, even when he tries to be the big man on campus with Whiplash and everything, Whiplash doesn't do anything of what he wants. It's clear Whiplash is only using him to get further ahead in what he wants. So, the fact that it's obvious that Hammer is just there. He doesn't really do anything, and he's not really that good as a villain, unfortunately. And on top of that, unfortunately, they're not the only problems with this. Another problem I can think of is too much with too little. I mentioned in my Iron Man vlog how I felt the dialogue in that movie was great. Like how fast paced it was, and how sometimes the characters would talk over each other, and sometimes it would do that. And for me, I think that helped the film feel more real, made the characters feel more alive, because it was helping put the actors out there and improvise. And they try to do the same thing with this movie, but unlike in that film where that was there to help build their character and what they were like, in this film it's more they do that with exposition. Important plot details are revealed as they're talking about this, and it's kind of hard to sift through all that when you have multiple characters just talking over each other. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You get the point. You actually have to listen to it, or sometimes they're too slow, or sometimes they're too quiet, and so forth. Like there's too much plot details that need to be that they're trying to rush out there, and sometimes an important plot point can go right over your head, and that's a problem, unfortunately. And like for example, like when we cut back with Hammer, when we cut back with Hammer back at the Grand Prix. Tony mentions how after the stunt that Tony pulled back at the Senate, apparently Hammer's weapons contract with the government got revoked. So, and it's just brushed right over and brushed through, and that's supposed to help fuel why he wants to take down Tony, not just to one up him, but just kind of little petty revenge. It becomes and again, it wouldn't be a big problem if this fast dialogue was there to help build character, like it was in the first movie. But in this case, the important stuff, the things that we should know to understand the plot, unfortunately, that does not help. That is also part of their dialogue, and it kind of results in a big jumbled mess when it comes to stuff like that, and that's unfortunately a flaw. And kind of in that same vein, another problem with this movie, way too much story. Like, as mentioned, the first Iron Man film knew exactly what it was and managed to kind of work its plots together. Like Iron Man's origin, Obadiah Stane's betrayal, the weaponizing of the arc reactor. That all flowed into each other perfectly. There was a story going on there, and it all worked together. It was not only trying to make an origin for Iron Man, but it was trying to also, but it managed to work everything together and put it into a good way. But in this movie, there's too much plot going on. Like, there's too much stuff coming in from all angles that it's kind of hard to focus on what you should be focusing on. Like, you got the government constantly hounding Tony Stark for the suit. We see Tony getting more self-destructive with the palladium poisoning. You got Whiplash wanting revenge against Tony. We got Justin Hammer wanting to one-up Tony. We got the stuff with S.H.I.E.L.D. We got the stuff with S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that stuff. We got Tony apparently not wanting to play with a team. Yeah, that's apparently a plot point in the movie. And it's supposed to feed into why he doesn't want to share the armor, but once again, I don't understand why he doesn't want to share it. This is a very powerful technology. It would wind up in the hands of idiots, because it did wind up in the hand of an idiot. So why would someone want... So I understand why he wouldn't want to share it with people. But they're treating it like, oh, he just doesn't like playing well with others. But no, that's brushed out. But that doesn't make any sense. And that's just a minor thing. There's so much going on in the movie that it's kind of hard to keep track of what you're supposed to be keeping track of. There's a reason I kept coming back to my phone when I was going over the plot summary. Because a lot of stuff whenever I see this movie goes right over my head, because there's so much going on with the fast dialogue and them trying to get all this exposition out with all these plot and all the plot going in. It's hard to keep track of a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, that's a flaw with the movie. It feels cluttered and rushed in some areas, and it results in a very fast-paced and, unfortunately, a little disorienting movie, which I don't like. That's something I don't like. And that, unfortunately, kind of hampers the movie to a degree. And again, there's the climax. I don't like what they did with Venko in the suit. Minor thing, but I understand. But I don't like that. I preferred Venko when it was just him in the exoskeleton. With the arc reactor in the center with the whips. Seeing him in his own Iron Man suit, no thank you. No thank you. I liked the other one. That was more intimidating. That was intimidating. Still using the star technology while being its own thing. Liked that more. But, with that being said though, I still think this is a good... There are still a lot of aspects that I like. For starters, I do like that it builds on more stuff for later films. I like seeing Nick Fury going in, and I do kind of like, and I do kind of like that, and I think one of the best, like, I think the strongest point of the movie is the stuff with Tony, actually. That, I think, is the emotional core of the movie. As you see Tony, as the more Tony starts succumbing to the palladium poisoning, you start to see him go more downhill and kind of degrade back into who he was before he got the shrapnel in his heart. Like, dog's about to jump on the bed, sorry. There it is. So, like, it starts small, like with Tony selling his art collection to the Boy Scouts, as Fury mentioned. But then things continue going up. He makes Pepper the CEO of Stark Industries. He decides that he's going to drive his own race car, even though he's got a guy for that. And then finally, it kind of comes to a head when he hosts a party, plastered off his ass in the Iron Man suit. And then when Rhodey comes in and starts fighting with him, he gets into a full out brawl, yells at his guests when they see the fight, and he doesn't stop Rhodey. Black Widow mentioned that apparently the suits have built-in security measures into them that would hold unauthorized personnel from stealing it. But yet Rhodey was able to just fly right out of the mansion wearing the suit, which means that Tony knew that Rhodey was probably going to take it. So yeah, it's actually a little heartbreaking. Like, as you see Tony progressively get worse and worse as everything is falling apart around him. Sorry, seed stuck in my throat from strawberries. Anyway, as you see Tony just going downhill as everything is falling apart around him, you really do feel sorry for him. And when it gets to the point where he has pretty much successfully self-destructed his own life, to the point where Pepper doesn't want to talk to him, people that worked for him are gone, all he has left now is his AI and his technology, it is kind of him at the bottom. It's just kind of him at a character standpoint back at the bottom where he started, and it's actually a little sad if you you do feel genuinely sorry for him as a result of this. And yet at the same time, you feel happy when he does manage to overcome it, as Nick Fury offers him a one last ray of hope, telling him that his father did have something built up that he might be able to use to build a new arc reactor, to build a new power source for the arc reactor. And when he does eventually succeed, it actually is really nice. When you see him overcoming those issues and finally doing that, and even eventually when he makes up with, and when he flies back in as Iron Man, triumphant, better, all good, and while the people he cared about don't exactly want to see him, he's able to win them back quickly by being his normal self, giving them regular camaraderie, telling Rhodey something's wrong, trust me for 5 minutes. Ivan Vanko's here. We need to get everyone out of this building. It's nice, and it's nice. I like that. And I think that's the biggest strength of the movie. I like just the Tony Stark stuff. Like, the story, I feel, is a jumbled mess. Like, it's got so much going on that it's trying to keep track of, and eventually become that it's hard to know what's going on and when. And there's a lot. It feels rushed in a few areas, but the stuff with Tony Stark, I think, is really good, and I think is the greatest strength. Is the strength and glue is the strength of the film and the glue that holds the rest of it together. And on top of that, it does have nice stuff that helps progress the Marvel Cinematic, the MCU. Like, we actually get War Machine now. Like, I knew who War Machine. Like, I guess I could talk about him because he's Iron Man affiliated. But I was aware of War Machine the same way that I first became aware. Like, I first became aware of War Machine with Spider-Man again. I again did not know who he was, though. Thanks to the Iron Man cartoon, I knew he was Rhodey. But suddenly to see that hint to see that little hint from Iron Man 1 get paid off in this film, where he goes downstairs, steals the Mark II suit, and then has it upgraded into the War Machine suit. It is really nice to see that, and to see him and Tony fighting side by side and even duking it out with each other before and after the upgrade, I think it's really fun to watch and is really cool. And we still got plenty of nice humorous moments, and on top of that, this film also set up the idea of some of the more, I guess I'll just say it, less interesting characters get more development. And I'm only saying less interesting because they're not the ones with flashy superpowers and so forth. I'm not saying that to detriment them as characters, because again, we get the introduction of Black Widow in this movie, and while she may not be as flashy as Iron Man, she is. This film does set up what she is. That we see her as a spy. We see her as a spy who's looking after Tony, and then when we get the reveal that she's actually working with Shield, I think that's really nice. And when we actually see her in her first act, and they do hint at her prowess and what she's capable of. But then when you actually see her as an active force, she kicks so much ass, and it's great. Now, again, we don't get much for her personal story here, since this is an Iron Man movie, and this is just meant to be her introduction. But at the very least, it is nice to actually see her getting stirred up. We do get more stuff with her in later films, like in Avengers, like with Avengers and all those other films, Captain America, with the Avengers and Captain America movies. So, for now, this is really just the introduction of her character. And so it makes sense, and again, so I think it kind of makes sense for her and other not powered characters to be introduced via this fashion, kind of letting the more marketable superheroes get top billing, and then kind of getting them along. It's kind of like if you attach a side character, it's like if you introduce a new set of characters into a show and hope that'll bring the audience back in, except, okay, I'm saying this in all the wrong ways, because I know people are probably going to get mad at me for saying all this, but rest assured, I like Black Widow. I do. I'm just trying to say that bringing her in an Iron Man movie will allow her to get more attention, so that more focus can be put on her later, so that it's just pretty much meant to be an introduction. It's small, it gives you what you want with her, and makes you interested in her and want to see more with her in later films, and it clearly worked, because there's a Black Widow movie coming up. But yeah, I think I should just stop talking about that before I dig myself into an even bigger grave, or an even larger grave. And again, another aspect of the movie I liked, the action. The action was so fun. Like, the first film, the action wasn't bad either, but by nature of it trying to be more weapons based, it felt a little slower to a degree. Like, it wasn't bad, but just a little slower. But in this film, it's a lot more personal. We actually get more fist fighting, more moving, more blocking, seeing people more trying to coordinate more. It actually feels more fast paced and it feels more fast paced and energized than in the first movie. It's really a joy to look at. Seeing Tony, like when Iron Man and Whiplash first battle, it's nice seeing. It's actually kind of cool seeing that. It's actually kind of cool seeing Tony outmaneuver him until he gets the suit and eventually manages to whip that gets close enough to him to finally knock him down. Or seeing Tony and War Machine duke it out twice, or seeing the drones flying all over the place and all the explosions. It's fun. It is great. It's amazing. I love it. And then eventually, and on top of that, when we actually get to the cooler fights, and on top of that, when we actually get to the fight with the drones where War Machine and Iron Man are fighting side by side, it is really cool. And in the fact that they're using that same that same fight choreography, it really helps cement it and makes it more fun to watch. So, I guess what I'm saying is, there are a lot of aspects of this movie that I like the stuff with, I like the setups for future movies, I think are pretty good, and with nice little hints, like with Nick Fury revealing that Howard Stark was the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., introducing Black Widow and War Machine, having the little cameos here and there, like with Thor's hammer and Captain America's shield. That's nice stuff. I liked the character's arc with Tony Stark, which I think was really nice and I was invested in. While Whiplash as a character, I didn't like. As an active force, I think he was cool to look at. The fight scenes were really fun and really nice. Again, just the problems that were the characters of the villains, which I didn't like. Ivan didn't have enough time dedicated to him, and Hammer was a weenie. The plot feels very cluttered and jumbled, and and because of the fast-paced dialogue, it can be rushed in areas, and I think that's a major problem. And I think those are major problems. And unfortunately, those problems kind of keep the movie from being great, like the first film was, and just kind of going into the decent, pretty good. Just kind of kind of make the film decent to pretty good. Not great, but pretty good and pretty good. So, yeah. That's all I have to say on Iron Man 2, so yeah. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we get the introduction of yet another Avenger with the God of Thunder himself, Thor.